Nick Underhill, at Nick _ Underhill. NewOrleans.football is the site. Nick out here fighting the good fight continually for even proven right. Nick Wright. Wow, this is too many Nicks, too many Wrights. So Nick Underhill's being proven correct as Nick Wright is in flames right now. The Saints continue to make free agent moves. They continue to clear cap room. He tried to tell you, and, well, I hope that you listened. Nick, what's up, man? How we feeling today?
Doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Before we get into Saints, Nick, I know that you're a beautiful mind, Russell Crowe, obsessive with football, and that's all you do is, like, watch film and talk to people. But do you have time for musicals? Do you have a favorite musical of all time?
I don't think I've ever seen a musical, so I'm gonna have to abstain from this conversation.
Oh my god!
Wait, I mean, okay, what about a movie? A movie musical, certainly, at least, right?
Like I left her. What was the movie with Ryan Gosling and they were singing the one all that? Yeah, like we dipped like 15 minutes into that. Like it was just like I can't even do that.
So is it fair to say then that all you do is listen to rap music and watch football?
I go to a lot of movies too. I just don't, the musicals like
okay.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't need it. I don't need it.
All right, Nick. Then we got a lot to get into, so let's go ahead and dive in. How about this? So a recent bit of news that is, kind of Saints news through the grapevine is CD Deuce not returning to Philadelphia after a year in which he had a ton of pass breakups, led the league, tied for the league in interceptions, and what's been the kind of prevailing notion in NFL circles, right, about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? Like, why can he not catch on with a team when fan base is beloved? It seems like his teammates love him, and he produces statistically.
I mean, he's a first-round talent that went in the 4th round, So I think it's just kind of, it's just kind of what we've seen throughout is just people seem to have a little bit of an issue committing there, and I don't want to say too much about someone that it doesn't really matter at this point. But, I think the disconnect between people that were out there at the practices and people who were talking about the practices while not being out there was that you kind of saw what happened last offseason play out. Like the contract wasn't coming together. He stopped practicing. There were blow-ups at practice. He was, he alluded one day, and I think this got reported somewhere that and I'm not someone that usually reports on what people say on the field of practice. So like, that's usually, I'm like, all right, that's the team's thing, not ours. But like, there was a day where he had a tight hamstring and he started screaming about like how they were trying to sabotage him. And this is what the team wanted and everything. There was a day where Chauncey didn't practice and DA tried to cover up for him and just said, hey, it's cramps, no big deal. And CJ had a bunch of tweets that night. And then the next practice, they got that trailer out there where it's a cooler where the players go in when they get overheated. Like no less than 20 times he went into that trailer, like passive aggressively, like, okay, you're going to say I got cramps, I'll show you. Like there are just things like this where it was coming to a head. And I think, as we talk privately on the sidelines, like my conversations were like, wow, they're letting this guy punk them. Like they can't keep this guy around. And this went on, he stayed around for weeks. And I think if I'm thinking that, other people on the team are seeing it. And I think it was just one of those situations where there's a new boss and one of the employees, it didn't work. They didn't get along. And that happens sometimes. And sometimes there's personality clashes and all that stuff. But this was one where it felt like very clear. And I actually put up a 53-man roster, like 2 days, like a projection before. And like, I was kind of thinking like CJ was going to get cut. And I was going back and forth, taking his name on, taking his name off. Cause I'm like, they got to get this guy out of here. Like this can't work. And I ended up leaving him off on accident. Like I meant to put him back on and like a bunch of people caught it. Like that's where this thing was at. It was just kind of like, if you were watching, it was like something's going to happen here. Like it has to happen. This can't go on like this. And, as beloved as he is and everything, like, I think that was kind of the reality of the situation. Now, I think they would have been better off if they figured out a way to keep him in the fold. I think he's a good player. They're a better defense with him than without him. But I think in this particular instance, it just felt like it was something that had to happen. And, I think we're kind of, things get confirmed, this confirmation bias. Okay, things didn't work with the Saints. Oh, now the Eagles, they're having issues with the contract. And I think it's just kind of, I think he just needs to have just a solid season and maybe the value comes back after the season.
Hey, just real quick, how does it play out for him in Detroit? I mean, Dan Campbell obviously was a Saints assistant, so like he can have conversations with different people how last year went, but Dan Campbell doesn't seem like someone that is going to be okay with someone trying to maybe sabotage his team if it ever got to that in Detroit.
Yeah, and look, I think the notion that he's like a all-time bad guy or something is just dispelled by the fact that people that know him brought him back in for another year. But I do think that there's just some fear of that long-term commitment, how this is going to go. But I think that's a good place for him. Look, those are people that I think he trusts, that he knows can be or on his side, that can get through to him, all that stuff. So I think that's a good situation for him. I expect him to have a good season there because he's a good player. And I don't think, though, that Dan Campbell's the type of guy that's going to put up with it. And if anything goes sideways, that is a 1-year contract. So you can walk away from it. You have those protections there. It's kind of, they feel like they got a good culture. They can bring them in. And if it goes sideways, you walk away and the damage is minimal.
So CD goes to Detroit. Jamal Williams comes to New Orleans. I want to get to Williams in a second. Real quick here, Nick. So reevaluating the original CD trade, do you rescore it now that he is no longer in Philly?
Well, I mean, the Eagles definitely won that trade. They got a guy that helped them get to the Super Bowl, led the league in interceptions, tied for the league lead in interceptions, for a 5th and 6th round pick, and they got a 7th round pick back. The one thing that I think you rescore it a little bit for the Saints, because I think the big fear here was he was going to leave. They were going to spend a 5th round pick on him, have the league leader in interceptions, and if he signs somewhere else, they get a comp pick in the 3rd round. The Eagles do, and it's like, well, they upgrade their draft capital. That would have been a huge kick in the face to the Saints. Ended up that their comp pick ended up being behind what the Saints got back from the Eagles. So I think kind of in that sense, it felt like maybe you rescored a little bit, like slightly more favorably from the Saints end, where it's like they lost a straight big time to like, all right. But look, here's the thing. This wasn't like a trade for value. It was a trade of, we're going to cut this guy and we got something back for him. It's kind of how it went. And so I think that the fact that this kind of happened made their evaluation of the situation look slightly better, but I still think overall the Eagles won this trade.
All right, Nick, now on to happier things. So the Jamal Williams signing was met with a lot of people being very excited. And if you're a nerd like me, that excitement grew in the press conference, as this is the single nerdiest and most quirky football player I have ever seen. He has an Eevee hat on during the interview. He's clowning Luke Johnson for looking like Guy Fawkes. It was just fantastic throughout. What were your biggest takeaways from Jamal Williams' opening press conference?
Well, I mean, like, what the hell is this guy talking about half the time? I don't know what an EV is or anything. So there's going to be some learning there. But look, I think he has a huge personality. It's genuine. I think that's going to make him a lovable fan figure, media figure, all that stuff. On the field, I like the fit. I kind of like the value too, sort of. It's not too much. It's kind of the Mark Ingram contract from 6 years ago. So I mean, to get the guy that led the league in touchdowns for that price is pretty good. I think he brings a lot of what they need, though, and he's someone that can score from the goal line. He can finish 1-yard runs, but I don't think that he's just a power back. I think he's somebody that has, power tools on his tool chest, and he has a hammer in, his side pocket. But there's some elusiveness to his game too. Not like at an elite level, but he can win with speed and agility, on the inside. He's not fast, but he can be quick. And I think he can be powerful when he needs to. I just think he brings like a nice combination of everything. And kind of watching his last season, kind of reminded me of LeGarrette Blount a little bit. You kind of get like the bigger guy on the outside, and he can get going when he's going, and there's some home run ability and all that stuff. So I think that he kind of brings what they really need to their running game. I'd still draft another one, get another guy in the pipeline, but I like what they did at that position, and it felt like, okay, this is like one of our biggest needs, and to get a guy that scored 15 touchdowns inside the 2-yard line or 5-yard line or something like that. I mean, that's what they were missing last year. So it felt like a very good, deliberate fit in that spot.
Yeah, and this isn't a case where that's all he can do. The fact that he does have, obviously, a nose for the end zone, that is a skill set that is very hard to find in the NFL. Like I was trying to tell our listeners, like it is not easy to score down there. We saw that last year with the Saints, but also ran for over 1,000 yards, had over 4 yards a carry. So it's not just the goal line. That's just maybe his strongest asset that he can give the team, but there is some more juice there.
No question. And he does kind of everything they do. And he's not like a scheme dependent runner either, which is, something that I think is an asset for them because they zone block, they gap block. He does all those things really well. And it's kind of like funny. I did a story like breaking down like by blocking scheme. Like a lot of his numbers are very, very comparable to Alvin Kamara's like across the board. And like I think when you watch them, they're different types of runners, but it just illustrates like how good the fit's going to be, and he can succeed in all the things they do, and it's not dependent on any one thing. But yeah, I think when people call him a power back, like it's kind of missing the mark a little bit. Like he can be powerful, but he's a really good one-cut runner, and like, he had more explosive plays than Alvin did last year, and he's more likely, just based on recent history, to give you a 50-yard run than anyone the Saints have had recently. So I think that there's a lot of things he does well. The value there is kind of crazy. And look, the other thing is he's been successful like in a committee atmosphere like his whole entire career. And I think that's important too. Like he can go out there and he doesn't have to have every single touch to get into a rhythm. But he showed us last year when Swift was out, if he does end up being the lead guy, like when Alvin, might be suspended, he can succeed in that role as well. So I think just what they need, I don't know that they could have went out and got a better player.
Yeah, we're watching the highlights right now. I love this guy's energy. Is he going to cause you to watch anime, Nick? So, I know you're a research freak. You dive into anything. Are you going to watch Naruto so you can, connect with Williams on an interpersonal level?
I don't know what that is, and no, I will not.
I don't either. I have no idea.
No
what that
respect
is.
for the film.
Hey, let me ask you. Let me ask you about the draft now, Nick, because we talk to you, obviously every week, and maybe it's changed a little bit. And I agree with you. Like running back in the draft feels like you still got to go out there, and it's so deep. You can get one in the later rounds, but is it still defensive tackle there in the first round? I know you've made a couple of signings. You've kind of shored up a couple of spots on the defensive line, but where do they go in the first round and where do they go at 40? Has that changed at all for you?
I think their needs still kind of remain the same. I think the one thing they really did here in free agency, though, is that they took off that immediate, you have to do this in the draft pressure on any one of those spots. And that's kind of the position you want to be in. I don't love their defensive tackle depth. I think they need a little bit more pass rush there. Saunders, I think, is going to be better against the run than they've had. Shepard might be too a little bit. And I think there's maybe a little bit of upside with him in the pass rush. You look at David Onyemata last year, he ended up with 5 sacks. He had pressure on 9.8% of his pass rushing plays. Damn. Shepard was at like 9.2, and he ended up with a sack and a half. But Onyemata had almost 200 more pass rushing snaps than him last year. Right. So if you give him more volume, maybe he's a guy that can get to 3-4 sacks in a year. But I still think they need someone on the inside that can win that one-on-one battle. And I do kind of feel like one of the reasons they didn't have many interceptions last year was because there wasn't enough interior pressure. Like you get interior pressure, that's when those gift picks come and quarterbacks do dumb things. And that just wasn't there last year. So I still put that near the top of my list. I still think they need another defensive end. More depth would be good there. I would still get another possession receiver, even though Mike Thomas is back in the fold. I think you need an heir apparent there and just a safety valve. So I think just in running back. So I think just kind of all the things we said they needed before still kind of exist. It's just like instead of like them being musts, they're kind of more like wants, strong wants at some spots, but they don't have to go in the draft and do anything specifically.
Nick Underhill, Nick_Underhill on Twitter. New Orleans Football is the site. Again, y'all, I just really cannot encourage y'all enough to sign up for the site if you're a Saints fan. It is so worth it. You get all the best information. It's now Nick. You got Mike Triplett there as well, who's a Saints legend on the beat. Nick, thanks so much, man, and you have a great week.